Hello, welcome to our program. This is the Freethought Forum. It's a program sponsored by the Rationalists of East Tennessee and the Atheist Society of Knoxville. And I'm Joe Barnhart.
And I'm Rita Lund. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, or if you do, you are not alone. Right now in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
So today our topic is going to be on emotion, and we'll get to this in more detail.
First, we want to tell you a little about the sponsors of our show. The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meet is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty at Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Okay, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have meetings regularly, first and third Sunday mornings of the month, and usually lectures and discussions and round the table discussions. They're very, very good. And the second Sunday, we hold a Skeptics Book Club discussion. On the fourth Sunday, alternating with a get-together for just reflection and potluck lunch, and it's usually in someone's home. On the alternate fourth Sundays, they often, and we get together for board games and similar activities. But let me interrupt myself here a minute to suggest on the 5th, a man is coming in, we think. For one thing, he wants to interview me on my book I wrote on In Search of First Century Christianity. It's trying to do what's a historical approach. And if we're lucky, we'll be able to nail him down to interview him, if we're lucky. That's what I'm hoping to do. Otherwise, we'll come up with something of our own. And on the 12th, we're going to have Ms. Hamilton is going to come in here and discuss the new birth phenomenon. Pauline Hamilton.
New birth.
The new birth phenomenon.
Oh.
And this is a book, A Naturalistic View of Religious Conversion, and she's also talking about this book, and I'm going to be here to help interview her and work with her, is Deconverted is the name of this book by Seth Andrews. And so that's going to be on the 12th.
Okay, so those are the next two programs?
Yeah, and we're hoping in the following programs to talk on themes like coming out of this program somewhat, on forgiveness and love. Now, we want to try to distinguish then love from being in love, and what's the difference, and try to bring in how reason and love interact. And
that will be a good
that's
one.
just, we want to spend a lot of time on that one. So, but that's a forecast of what we're hoping to do.
Well, that's good. Well, later in the show, we'll give you our websites to visit for additional details, including times and locations of the activities we've mentioned. Today, we're going to deal with emotions and how they affect our lives, our beliefs, our actions. You're on, Joe.
Okay, we're ready to go. And most of us have at least a general idea of what emotions is, especially if we say to ourselves, don't be so emotional. Usually when they do that, we're talking about at least body language, and often the pitch of our voice will rise a bit, and certainly the volume of the voice, unless we're really sobbing, and then it'll maybe go. And so we all recognize we have a pretty good range of emotion, but you and I need to go into some detail on this, don't we? What emotion is, and I would say it's at least feeling. You got the smooth muscles and glands operating.
Well,
That's
going back to Random House to start with, an emotion is an affective state of consciousness. It's not cognitive in dealing with thinking, thinking.
okay.
And it's not volitional, where you're forcing yourself to do something. It's things like joy, fear, sorrow.
Anger, yeah.
So,
How about resentment? Would that be an emotion? That's a hard one, isn't it?
yeah.
Well,
But,
go ahead.
I think, I'm just trying to think, when I think of resentment, I think of it as, well, maybe it's an emotion that really triggers action.
Okay.
Either doing or not doing.
Okay. I'm thinking, I think the woman is Martha Nussbaum. I'm not sure of her first name, Nussbaum. It's written a lot of good stuff on emotion. She also wrote a wonderful work on tragedy. But her thesis is that our emotion is interacting with and infused with cognition. Anger, for example, you can't just be angry, you got to be angry about and at something, and that takes some cognition.
That's true, but I think
Now, you
emotion jumps in first.
Well, sometimes even then, I think it
Maybe
jumps in with minimal cognition, but you have to have some to have some vague notion of why you're angry. I remember at a meeting once a guy was angry and he said, by the way, what am I angry about? He got so angry he forgot what he was angry about. And we can all identify with that.
Oh, that's,
But most of us know that, that emotion, first of all, has body activity usually. The smooth muscles and glands are agitating. And the face may change color, and then it can get darker, or the blood can drain, and it's publicly observable in most cases. In that sense, it's covert behavior. And it's overt behavior and covert behavior. Covert means behind the skin, but it's still action. And so it takes a lot to be emotional. Now, usually, when someone is being emotional and we're trying to correct them, what are we asking them to do? Don't be so emotional.
Calm down. Change. Don't be so sad.
And if you're angry, don't release your fist.
Right.
Sad, yeah. Now, sadness is something we can talk about, because sometimes sadness gets so extended into so many areas of our lives that beyond a certain point in time, it becomes depression.
Yes.
Now, most of us know what sadness is, but we're not depressed.
No, we learn to accept whatever the loss is that's causing the sadness.
I remember when my mother died, I was sad. I mean, and of course, when you're 8, and I just turned 18, I couldn't understand the enormous loss I had. That took centuries, almost, in its emotional centuries, for me to realize. I mean, only years later to realize what a loss that was, 10, 15 years later. But I was never depressed, even though she was only 41. But I was unbelievably sad, but I don't think it was depression. How would you define depression from sadness?
I think sadness allows one to adapt.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah. You can still.
You obviously were, though you were sad about your mother, you didn't go into a depression. You had enough maturity to be able to adapt.
I could function.
Yeah.
I couldn't. I was taking my first year of Greek. I couldn't afford the depression.
No. And it probably was a good thing that you couldn't dwell on the thing.
That's right.
You were not holed up at your family home to miss your mother. Physically, in that sense. And you're busy. You were busy.
Yeah,
So,
And when you're that young, it's just too much. When I mean, I had just turned 18,
Yeah.
and then I was a month into 18. And that's an awful lot to have to deal with. And you got 3 young siblings. And so I was sad. But in a way, depression would have been a luxury I could not afford at that time. And I just wouldn't, it would be, in some ways, would you say depression is a movement toward being dysfunctional?
Oh, yes, yes.
Okay.
You're either doing too much of something or not enough. You're either overeating or you're starving. You're sleeping all the time or you're not sleeping at all.
Oh, and that's when you need other people who can observe you. I mean, you may not be aware of your own depression sometimes.
Well, if you sleep too much, you're going to be late.
And yeah. Now we got a call come in.
Oh,
so.
very good.
Okay. Hey, go ahead. We got a caller. Come in, please. Give us a name, huh?
Holly.
Go.
I'd like to know, it says on the screen, religion and emotional issue, and I'd like to know how you see religion as being an emotional issue, and I'll just hang up and let you talk.
Oh, I've got it right off.
Okay, thank you.
Right off the top of my head. I'm thinking guilt. Now, guilt is an emotion.
Okay.
And boy, some religions, they really pound guilt into a person to try to convince them to go along with that particular religious group's belief. That's just
question.
me.
Well, no, that's some. Let me ask you this:
Yeah.
if you could go through a little process to say, I want never again to have any guilt, would you?
Oh no, guilt is a healthy thing at times.
I like that.
A little, guilt serves a good function in terms of a little bit of guilt is a good thing because it spurs you on to possibly doing the correct
it's
thing.
a way. It's would you say guilt in a way? If it's what I want to call rational guilt.
Yeah.
It's as if you have someone else who's looking more objectively at your behavior and saying to you, you're not shaping up.
That's my mother when I was a youngster. Rita, you have not written your aunts yet for their your Christmas presents.
And if your mother's rational, that's rational
That
guilt.
was, Mom was rational and Rita was guilty and the notes got written. What can I tell you? Practical example.
Yeah. And then Freud says we internalize this so that when Mom's gone,
we're still writing the notes.
Yeah, we still write notes. And that's what I would call rational guilt. Now, some things we internalize, we need to rework.
Oh, that's true.
Because we got other, and the reason is not that we do away with guilt. We've got so many other things that we were responsible for. And so one guilt says, look, you got to get over this guilt because we've got other responsibilities.
You've got other things lined up to work on.
I had it wasn't a client because I wasn't making any money, but I did a lot of counseling in my younger days. And when you're a teacher, you get a lot of this in college. And someone was just burdened with guilt on and on and on, after it seemed like a month. And I said, look, I was, seeing no progress at all. And I said, so I tried a different trick. I said, look, this is wrong. It's your arrogance. That's the. And in other words, I put a guilt trip on guilt.
Him.
I said, this is sheer arrogance. You think you have this much control in life, and therefore you're feeling guilty for not doing it, and that's BS. And that helped. It helped her to see, this guilt trip was just serving her for no good end. And I said, you got a responsibility to be up and doing something and not running around looking at your navel and I went on and on.
Yeah. No, the world does not revolve around you.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was saying. It was egotistical in that respect. And later on she came around and said, you sure did. She let me have it.
Hey, sometimes that's necessary.
But that was good. So I guess what we're agreeing on, if I'm understanding, is that there's intelligent guilt.
Yeah,
and
that's a good way of putting it.
And sometimes we need to have more of it, and sometimes less. Depends on what the situations are.
True. Now, what else can we, about this lady that called in? And
well,
how
on
does
religions, see, I don't want to say that things like guilt and emotion have to do with or without religion. It's human.
Yes.
And some people have emotions and are also in religious groups, and other people have emotions and they're in other groups. But all of us are in groups, one way or another, and those groups put some responsible tag on us. And if we accept it, then that's how guilt comes in. Or, and you mentioned joy.
Huh.
I don't think I want to give joy over just to religion.
Oh, no.
Or
no.
one religion. It's just human. And some religions, understandably, since there are people gathered together with a worldview, and then they work on these. So I don't want to get in a position saying if people are religious, they're irrational, and if they're not religious, they're rational, because I know too many rational people who are religious, and some are just mean, and I know the same about atheists. In fact, I was talking to somebody the other day, and I said, and he was putting a religion to him. I said, the trouble with you, you're just plain mean. So, I probably, he felt the same about me, I'm sure. Go ahead.
I wonder, though, if different kinds of religion dampen down emotions in some people.
Well, I'm sure.
You know? Just like I think that some religions put big guilt trips on people. I think that some people they're not allowed, so to speak. It's wrong. It's a sin to feel resentful.
Okay, now all groups do this. All groups, because without it, everybody's going to do exactly what they feel and think and do externally what they want.
Well, I think people need to be allowed to feel their own emotion.
Oh, no, that's another point. Sure.
That's it. I mean,
that's private.
And someone being said, "Oh, don't be angry. You're not allowed to. Don't be sad." You know. I mean, I think that's
none of their business. If it's private for you, it's your business.
Yeah, I think there's too much of people not being allowed to have their own feeling. It's how they act out overtly, and how long, or if something gets dysfunctional.
Now, some groups, would you say, allow you to express certain emotions,
Yes.
and in a healthy way, and some don't. Other groups are somewhat mixed. You can have healthy expression. Some have unhealthy expressions, all in the same group, it seems to me. And that's because human beings are themselves mixed up.
We are all quite unique, idiosyncratic beings.
I've been in meetings, academic meetings, in which I see strong emotion. Now, usually it doesn't appear like jubilation. It's more like anger and resentment. You see, theirs are more acceptable.
Probably based on jealousy, which is hidden.
I think you hit it right on the nose.
Yeah.
And envy is a very destructive thing. And that's why I'm glad footnotes were invented, even though they are a pain in the neck. At least you're saying, I didn't invent all this myself. By the way, I learned a lot from somebody else.
Yeah.
And envy, though, has been a very destructive thing on various societies, I think. It's not very productive, which is different from jealousy in the sense of I could be jealous of somebody's success, but not necessarily envious. Does that make, or do I have it backwards?
I don't know. I would like to know. I think of the words synonymously almost. So enlighten me.
Okay, I'm just going to ordinary language.
Yeah.
I think if someone has jealousy, that's the assumption that someone's encroaching on something that they have a right to.
Yeah.
And they don't want someone taking away what's theirs. Now, sometimes I think there are two uses of the word envy. One I think is fine, and the other is if I envy someone and I want to bring him down so I can get him, that's very destructive.
Oh, that's for sure.
And that can ruin a social group. And other kind of envy, we do it in a more pleasant way. I can say, boy, I really envy your ability to do this.
It's sort of it's a compliment.
It's a compliment.
Yeah.
And it says,
without just plain saying flattery.
Yeah. You don't want to be accused of flattery, so you say, well, I envy you. And you communicate goodwill that way, I think.
All right.
And
jealousy doesn't have any positive things necessarily.
Yeah, it just says, you're on my territory, get off
Out.
on my territory.
All right.
I'm trying to teach, see what you think of this. Is it, I'm in a Unitarian church, and we have little presentations to children.
Yeah.
And I often think I could do better if I just talked to children. And I often think you can't use the word a sociopath to a child. They wouldn't know what you're talking about. But I often wondered if, I was thinking of this and thinking, how would I talk to children?
About a sociopath?
Yeah.
Oh.
Because there are sociopaths in the world.
Oh, that's
and they need to be aware of it. But I also it got me to thinking, can sociopaths change and become better persons? And I don't know the answer to that.
A genuine sociopath
they're so manipulative.
Is an asocial person. So they don't know how to, and asocial would be not being able to work with people around you. And I really wonder if that is possible. My doubts would be against that.
That seemed to be would have to come in degrees, wouldn't it?
Well,
to be a total sociopath, you wouldn't. But there are people who seem to me to not be able to identify with the feelings of others, except, now I'm using the word identify, see what you think. They can recognize other people's feelings because they're trying to manipulate the other person, so they know how to play on other people's feelings.
True.
But that's different from identifying with. The word calm means with, so compassion is you have feelings with them. And I'm not sure a sociopath really can do that. I mean, am I making any sense?
Yes. I think of a sociopath, a sociopath is born an infant and is influenced by the his environment or her environment. And if there is nothing that serves as a positive role model, there is absolutely no reason for that individual to grow up to be anything other than a sociopath.
So he wouldn't know what to do.
No, but there's no role model.
And
I think at a young age, if this is just all my thought, if a youngster has no good role models at a certain point, well, they're out for their own survival, and they're going to develop non-positive ideas and feelings, emotions. They're not going to have any positive feelings.
Okay.
They've had no experience of joy, no experience of satisfaction.
Okay, and that's why maybe people, when they get together and sing together, they are learning to share emotion and learn that their part in the music depends on other people's part in the music. I like that analogy, that part of our joys, this is the only way I know how to communicate with a sociopath, is part of your joy would be to share in the joys of others. And if you miss out on that, then your self-interest is curtailed. In other words, Selfishness is not self-interest. Self-interest includes sharing in the joys and the happiness of other people.
Joe, a sociopath may not ever have experienced joy.
Joy, and
so
that's
you
it.
can't talk about them.
Well, I think they've experienced joy and triumph in manipulating.
Yeah,
but,
well,
but
that's true.
Not shared joy, maybe. I don't know. It's hard to get inside the frame. You can't go up to a sociopath and say, tell me what's it like.
This all started with you talking to children. What do
Well,
you tell? And I'm
Well,
ready-
it started when I was once talking with children. I said, try to think what it would be like if you never had the pleasure of somebody else's pleasure you're working with or playing with. In other words, let's suppose you're watching somebody having a lot of pleasure, but you can't do it. But you can see they're having a lot of pleasure. Now, if that can give you pleasure, that's something that you didn't have a moment ago. So the pleasure of other people can be a source of your pleasure too, and you're not robbing them, but you're helping yourself. And then if they know you're sharing your pleasure, that's going to give them pleasure. And I was trying to show that pleasure in that sense is interactive.
and the ones having the pleasant time just might get around to including the other person.
Including, yeah. So resentment doesn't get you very far.
No.
It seems. And so to learn to share in the pleasures of others, even vicariously. You can't use the word vicariously for children, but
a youngster has to be of a certain amount of reasoning age to take a vicarious pleasure in someone else's.
yeah, it takes a lot of brains to do that. Yeah, and a certain
Yes.
step. It's true. Yeah, I was so pleased when I heard a child recently, age 12, tell me about some kids mistreating a 2-year-old, and this 12-year-old was saying that she and one of her friends went to the defense of that little 2-year-old. And I thought, well, now this is...
They've learned.
They've learned at the age of 12, and that's really
that's
encouraging. We need more of those. So emotion, in that sense, includes feeling. And I'd want to emphasize pain and pleasure
All right.
as rock bottom. I think I mentioned on this program once, I said to a preacher who was denouncing pleasure. In fact, he was getting a lot of pleasure out of it. I mean, he got carried away with it. But I asked
I don't want to meet him.
I asked him later, I said, what if you could get to heaven and everything you want but no pleasure? Well, he finally got the point. See, part of human life, and dog life too for that matter, is pleasure.
Yeah.
And the only time pleasure is wrong, in my opinion, is when we're interfering with other pleasures.
Or other people's.
Other people's pleasure or my own. In other words, I love ice cream. I mean, I could eat it for breakfast.
Oh, I would have no trouble either.
But no more than a half a gallon at once. But I asked my family, for my sake, don't have it in the house in those gobs. And they will bring in these little ones. And because I don't drink, but I can sure identify with alcoholics. You know, I'm an ice cream holic. But I know ice cream is not that good for you beyond a certain point.
Right.
It clogs you up. And that's pleasure. But it's, in the long run, it interferes with a lot of my other pleasures. But I think pleasure ought to be the starting point for discipline. In other words, you discipline yourself because you want pleasure. So you control one for the sake of another.
Yep.
Does that make any sense?
You know, it's emotions in action.
Exactly,
The action.
exactly, yeah.
The action part of emotions.
So emotions include feelings, and I think we agreed covert behavior and this, you know, the glands, and overt behavior. Yeah. And so it's publicly observable. My anger, after a while, can be publicly observable, or my joy.
Yeah.
And so cognition I mean, if I'm going to be joyful, I got to be about something.
True.
So that takes thinking. And sometimes we are angry or joyful over something that doesn't make sense. I mean, suppose someone is just mistreating another person, we're getting joy out of it. And
That's why you have the word sadism.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so even though it's pleasure, we say, well, no, that's not going to contribute to an overall pleasure in human society or a family.
The best good for the greatest number of people.
Yeah. And then, so I think we agree that even anger as an emotion, it has to have cognition.
Oh, yes. As you said, we have to be angry about something. You know.
And sometimes people are angry and don't know why. I mean, they do. In other words, this is where I think Freud is helpful, is that we do think unconsciously most of the time. That is, we cannot put it into words. That's all it means, unconscious.
Yes.
Somebody else, we can't put it into words, but we're nevertheless are thinking, but we can't verbalize enough to face up to it. And that's why we're angry. And if someone else can point it out and help us to verbalize it, again and again, after a while, then, oh yeah, it's as if we can verbalize it, it's someone else now is telling it and pointing it out to us. And there, you would agree there's justifiable anger.
Oh, by all means. By all means. I had trouble because in my life, because I didn't know anything about anger. We got a phone,
we got a call. Yeah.
Oh, let's go to that.
Don't lose that thought.
All right.
Okay, let's have our caller. Please, go ahead.
Hey, Joe, this is Larry.
Oh, Larry, go ahead.
Yeah.
Hey, Larry.
I saw that your topic was religion and emotion, and I caught just a little bit of it a little bit earlier when you were talking about guilt and stuff. Mm-hmm. But have you talked about death and afterlife? That's a huge emotional roller coaster for people.
It sure is, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you talk to people about not believing in God, and they say, "Are you serious?" You know, if I were an atheist, I didn't have to give up the hope of ever seeing my mother again, or my family, or any of that. And death itself is so scary. That's a huge emotional itself, is the fear of death that people can kind of waylay by religion. By using religion, whether it's true or not, they still use it to waylay that fear.
Well, I'm glad you brought that in, Larry. Can we talk about that?
Yep.
Certainly, but I'm driving right now, so I just wanted to bring it up and let you go over that a little bit with each other.
Well, drive carefully. Now that you're talking about death, drive carefully.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
And be sure to invite everybody down to the happy hour afterwards.
Good. Right after this program. Thank you. Down at Bar.
Okay. Well, y'all take care. You're doing great.
Thank you, Larry.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Now let's bring up and talk about the death thing, because it isn't.
People deny death. That's why they.
Well, it's because Larry's right. It brings an enormous amount of sadness in our lives.
Yes.
I mean, unbelievable sadness sometimes.
But I think one of the reasons there is so much religion is because religions all deal with afterlife and going on.
Yeah, well,
or something.
Most religions do. If you're on Buddhism, that's
all right.
Theravada Buddhism doesn't.
No, there are a couple that don't.
Not the Hinayana,
But
okay, but let's deal with that death, because Larry's right. That's an incredible loss. Now, let's say the death of another person, we can understand. Somebody dear to us, to lose that person, it's just unbelievable loss. Even a kid, you lose a dog, that's a loss. But someone dear to you, a person. And so the sadness. Now, religions of certain types have come in to say, well, when you die, that's only temporary. You've gone somewhere.
Right, and you're going to meet
the
rest of your family.
Now, unfortunately, and I can sympathize with that. The religions I can't sympathize with are these sadistic religions that say, well, when you die, if you were with us, we'll be there in a good time and eating a lot and so forth. But if you're not on our religious program, to hell with you, and they mean it literally,
Yeah.
then that's what I call mean-spirited people. Or let's put it this way, a mean-spirited religion, and if the people really emotionally and physically and verbally get plugged into it, then at that point they are behaving meanly, if there is such a word.
Yes.
And so, but you can understand people's wanting to prolong their lives unless they think about it. I've often wondered if you live to be, say, 2,000 years old, after 450 years, to what extent are you the same person?
You're not.
Yeah. So in what sense is that immortality? It's another, you've been replaced by another person.
But I guess I'm very much a 2 feet on the ground practical soul. And nobody has come back and said to me, hey, it's really nice up there, you know, and stuff. I have one life, and it's here, and it's up to me to do the best I can for other people, to make my own self happy and independent, etc. And I have wonderful memories of my mother, but I have no expectations of ever seeing her again.
And I remember someone told me when I was about 60, well, you will see your mother in heaven. And I said, well, actually, I'll be her father. She died at 41, I'm 60. He said, oh no, we'll all be about 25. I said, well, that was a nice invention, but where'd you come up with it? And how'd you come up with that, you know? Well, you can see how he came up with it. He wanted to try to solve a problem, and he just invented it out of nothing. And that's all it is. It's just invention out of nothing.
Yeah.
Because we don't. Now, it's interesting to look in the New Testament where you have Jesus early in the resurrection stories. They're just appearances. Usually it's something like a vision or a trance, like in the book of Acts, Jesus' voice. Peter doesn't see Jesus, just hears his voice. And then I think what happened is in the 15th chapter of 1 Corinthians, you have Paul saying Peter first saw Jesus and all that. These are all just appearances. And I think after a while that these early Christians got to realize, oh, we got just ghost stories here. So they came with all these body appearances stories later in the Gospel of Matthew. Mark doesn't have much. That's the first Gospel. That's about 70 A.D. Then Matthew toward the end of the century. And by the time you get way in the Gospel of John, you have Thomas claiming that he wants to handle Jesus' hands in the prints. And so in other words, they're getting away from just spirits. And then Paul comes up with it. Paul's got some ambivalence about the body being in the next life. Because, you know, he's probably had rheumatism or arthritis. So he talks about a spiritual body.
Oh, yeah. Get rid of the pain.
Yeah, get rid of the... But all that, as far as we could tell, is just wishful thinking. Death is something we need. And what we need as rationalists try to realize it. We need to be saying to ourselves, when people are sad, you can't just snuff that off.
Oh no.
And so
that's a legitimate emotion, and it's when there's a death, certainly it's an appropriate emotion.
Exactly.
I mean,
so and to say that you just ignore it is to be in denial. Some people are in denial about their own pleasures, it seems to me. And that's a kind of, I know of some atheists who are Puritans. What I call Puritan atheists. They can't identify with other people's pleasures if those other people are religious. Are you with me?
Oh, I could understand if that's that person's need.
Yeah.
To.
In other words, I don't want to think that they have to agree with me on everything before I can identify with their pleasure, even though I think some of their views are not my views.
Yeah.
But I can still get pleasure in their joy.
True.
And as Larry Rhodes once said to me, he's not concerned about whether people believe in the God or not. Just don't get on his
His
back.
back, right.
Get into politics and trying to ruin his life. Now, I'm not giving, Larry had a more elegant way of putting it, but I think this is what he was saying, is that he doesn't want people who have a religious view trying to use politics to get in on his life. And I'm with him. That's good church-state separation.
We have about 20 minutes left, or less than that.
Okay,
So,
in case you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum. It's sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded by these and by individual contributions. Shows are mostly live, at least I hope we appear that way, and from 5 to 6 p.m. on Community Access Television, Channel 6 or Channel 12, depending on your cable network. Tell your out-of-town friends to look on ctvknox.org.
This is a call-in show, and we are live today, Tuesday, July 29th. Viewers can call in to the number that's on the screen with a short comment or a question. And call in now while we go to an informative break.
Okay, now the Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. There we have evening meetups for food and drink and conversation and fun. And I want to invite you to this time. The purpose of ASK is to supply a venue for community camaraderie and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and like-minded people in East Tennessee. Go ahead.
On Tuesday, our Tuesday meeting going on now is at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Knoxville Old City. The Rationalists of East Tennessee have Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussions on subjects topical and timeless. Once a month we get together for a book club. Recently, one book discussed and reviewed was The Righteous Mind, Why Good People Are Divided by Politics and Religion by Jonathan Haidt. You don't have to read the book to attend, but it does help. Visit rationalists.org to find the rest of the calendar of books that are coming up for review. Join us at Barnes & Noble Booksellers, 8029 Kingston Pike at 4 p.m. every second Sunday.
Okay, now, the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help make this program available and a social outlet, too, for these other groups. So be with us. Be a part of the group.
Remember, you are not alone.
You're not alone. Be with us. Okay.
All right, we're back again.
Back again on our topic of emotion. I would argue, and see what you think, as a conjecture. In my later years, I don't have my theories so much as my conjectures.
Oh, okay.
A conjecture is one that you put out as a theory, and part of it was shot down.
Yeah, but you still like it.
I still like the part, part that survived. I still like. Yeah. And I remember once I was telling one of my friends today. I had someone who was reading my manuscript for me, and she said, "Well, I hate to tell you this," and she was getting criticism, and I finally had to explain the criticism is what I want, because it's a good criticism. First of all, tells you they paid enough attention, and that's a compliment.
Oh, yes.
And then it also says they want to help you to make it better. So a good criticism.
It's like I rewrote some of your stuff here earlier, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like a coach who's helping you to be a better player. So it's not a put down. Hey, we got another call. Good deal. Go ahead. We got a caller. Go ahead and tell us your name and what you have in mind. Well,
You got to be on.
Oh, well, yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, hello?
Go. We can hear you.
I'm Joan, and I'm calling because I wanted to ask you, do you think in Christian religions that are emotional are more successful than those that are trying to be more rational, or is it just that different people choose religions that have different levels of emotions?
I think
Go ahead.
some people, by their nature, are more subdued emotionally. And a person like that would never really feel comfortable, I don't think, in a charismatic type of situation where there's a lot of overt action in terms of speaking in tongues and
a lot of emotion and commotion and motion. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I think that a person's inner sort of metabolism, emotional metabolism, helps determine what kind they like. Some people are very emotional, and that's just, they'll go for a charismatic type of situation, I think. Whereas someone who's come from a very subdued, cognitive-oriented, background wants something that is lower key.
But in the United States now, or on TV and so forth, well, just in the United States, do emotions help a church grow? Are they more successful, do you feel?
Okay. I think you could say this. People need to have some emotional expression, and they need to be in an environment that's accepting, and an accepting environment that says it's okay for you to have emotions and emotional expression, at least up to a point. I think that's what I'd call a reinforcement group. And a good example is a football game. It's perfectly acceptable to get up and scream your head off.
If that's your thing.
And they have fun and they enjoy it. Now, what I enjoy now, especially on a real cold day, is watching them on television scream, and I'm there with them if my team is winning, but I don't want to be in that cold weather. Now, I don't know if we're dealing with this. Let me get back on. Joan, are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah. Are we addressing what you're talking about?
Well,
Go.
Do you feel that over the years that emotion has helped churches grow more than the ones that were less emotional? Because your topic is emotion in religion, and I wondered if you feel it's an advantage or not.
Well, it does seem to be. These so-called non-denominational churches that get to be pretty large, they are mostly very conservative in their theology, but they bring in a lot of bands, and many of them, and a lot of hoopla music.
Yeah, they bring in a lot of money too, because they have huge structures.
Yeah.
I think that the emotion around a church group, the acceptable emotions, are all very positive, and people are going to want to be part of that.
Exactly. Yeah.
They're not dwelling on resentment, jealousy, grief. They are talking about joy. And if you get on the joy bandwagon, you're going to be joyous and you're going to support the church, is what I'm thinking.
Now, the preacher may come in with his resentment in his sermons, but the music is usually not resentment. I think your point's well taken. It's mostly a joyful celebration kind of thing.
That's
and people are, I mean, this, and that's not spiritual, that's moving the body. And that's why they say it's moving. They can feel it, and it's right here in the body. It's not just brain states, it's whole body states and brain. And, what kind of thoughts, Joan, do you have on that?
Oh, not much in particular. I grew up in a religion that was not very emotional.
Well, you grew up with Calvinism, it sounds like.
Yes.
Calvin is, I remember in seminary we had the view, Calvinism is when you grunt with more exhilaration. That's good. That was a caricature.
Yes.
No smile.
Well, God predestined me to be saved. Oh, boy. And that was the end of it.
Well, no, that's a bit of an exaggeration.
Yeah, that's what's called a caricature.
Yeah.
But,
okay.
But
well, I'll let you finish up.
But you brought up a really good point, and we need to focus on that. That music and getting together to sing is a major contribution to the human species.
Oh, yes.
And it took centuries for this to develop. And it takes a lot of discipline to sing well, especially with musical instruments involved. And I mean, that's an amazing coordination.
There's just the whole ordinary group of people like me. I may not be good, but I'm loud. You know, that in terms of, you know, being part of a group of singing, that sort of thing. No, that's glue for any group.
Yeah, it is. And we should not underrate that, and we should understand this better, how important this music is for, people say it's good for the soul. I'll translate this, it's good for the whole person to have this emotional development and emotional growth and rational growth and moral growth. All of that is to be a total person.
Right.
And all groups need this.
When you
well, thanks for your time, and I'll go now.
Well, thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye. She always has a good contribution on that. Go.
When I think of singing, it is, the first time I went to the Musical Monday down at the Tennessee Theater, the Free Musical Monday, and the organ came up, and I didn't know what to expect, and I was alone, and everybody, they erupted. And the Star Spangled Banner was starting. I was in tears.
Sure.
I mean, it was just so moving to see everybody, you know. And that was such a, it just, you know, boom. The patriotism just shot out, and that was a very emotional thing. Right? Just that, you know. And then think about people can crying with grief. Singing.
The music sometimes there helps a lot when people in there to express their grief in music.
Yes.
It's a very good instrument for. I remember as in high school, they had. I'm glad Joan brought this up. In high school, they had opera from New York on radio. And my voice then was incredibly strong. And I would imagine myself there with these singers, and I would sing to them. And I think I mentioned on this program, my mother once came into the house and said, "Joe, when I got off of the streetcar here in Knoxville, 2 blocks away, guess who I heard?"
You.
I thought I was alone in the house. But this was such an exhilarating thing for me to sing along with these people who were up there in New York singing, and it meant so much to me personally. And I think there are a lot of people like this who couldn't be in a group singing, but they can, in a car, people can sing. And so it's understandable these churches and the groups get together that the music's important.
Oh, yes.
To people. And what's interesting to me, it takes a lot of brains to write something great like Beethoven. I think I may have mentioned the scores of Beethoven. Karl Popper, who was my favorite philosopher, was into music before philosophy. And he says that he saw copies of the Beethoven scores when he was writing, and then you can see where he's correcting and correcting and correcting, saying, that wasn't working, this works better. And he's giving this example in scientific research. That experiment didn't work, let's try this one. And what I'm saying, music itself is a brain activity.
Oh, yes.
So it's a combination of the intellect and all the rest of us. And that's why it's so very moving to the, and I think I mentioned another group. In some kinds of music, they say it's got soul. That's what it means, it all works together. And that's Aristotle's use of the word soul, is all of it working, the whole body and the music and all of it working together. And it is truly moving.
Well, I think of music, fine music. I think of fine music as being a demonstration of spirituality.
I got you. I see what you mean. Yeah. Yeah. In the sense,
because there are those of us, in spite of being free-thinking, secular humanists, feel that there is a spiritual aspect to life, and music belongs in there.
Yeah. Now let me ask you on the word spiritual. All right, you're not talking about spooks.
Oh no, I'm talking about
a horse has spirit.
Oh yeah, no.
Yeah, so you're using the word. I've said this often. The meaning of words are the way people use them. So when you hear the word spirit, it don't necessarily mean a spook or a disembodied being.
Oh no, no.
So then there's a good use of the word spirit, but you have to know what and I know exactly what you're talking about. That's spirited. And then I don't use the word spiritual because other people have these spook concept.
Oh,
but I know how you're using it.
I'm using it as part of the essence of me.
I like it. I like it.
It's part of my essence.
We got another call.
Oh, okay.
Okay, let's hear what you have to say. Good, from our caller, please. Go.
Hi. Hello.
Go.
Hello.
Go.
Oh, this is Louise. I was calling about the music.
Good. Go.
In the churches, you know, and how they force-fed you the music at the right times. And one of them was at the end when they wanted to get people up to the altar, they would sing
Just as I am, or whatever.
Just as I am. And real sad to make people come up there.
Oh, well, I remember that. Well, listen, our time is running out, but I wish you had called in earlier. The next time, call in again. Will you promise? Because we're running out. We're running out of time.
I will. I've seen you several times. I will. I'll call again.
Okay, I thank you. Billy Graham wrote a book called Just As I Am, I think. But I know these mournful songs to get people to come down. Yeah, go.
We're on our way out of here. We're just about out of time.
Sponsored by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and
the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Okay.
Join us again.
I want to thank you for joining us, and be back with us next Tuesday, same time, 5 o'clock Eastern Time, p.m.